All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, I wanted to answer a question from a new subscriber, Alex Ding. He actually responded on my Grant Cardone video. A single Grant Cardone video made me $650,000. And he says, Pietros, I've watched several of your videos, and I appreciate you being so transparent about your compounding machine. I really enjoyed this video. How did you get enough money for the hefty down payment? The average 30-something doesn't have 300,000 for a down payment. Basically, I'm interested in the beginnings of Pietros Maneos. By the way, next time I'm in Boca, I wouldn't mind meeting up. I really appreciate that, Alex. And before I get into this, just want to thank some newer subscribers and people that have been commenting. James T, Alex Ding, Optics 19, Glory Days, and a couple others. It really seems like now that there's over 1,400 subscribers, I've brought in some people here that are really enjoying these videos. So very much appreciate that. Question here is about the down payment. Well, I think maybe you misunderstood a little bit. The down payment happened because of the sale of Bramabella. I purchased Bramabella Vineyards in 2012 for in the twos, I believe. And that was done from savings I've had. I had at the time when I was in my 20s. I actually ran a personal training business. I did well with that. And my girlfriend was involved, and my mom was involved in the Bramabella transaction. And, we purchased that in the twos, and we cashed out on that in the high sevens. So there you go. That's kind of how it happened. So it was really a real estate deal. But I actually wanted to discuss that a little further because you asked the question. Basically, I'm interested in the beginnings of Pietros Maneos. That property actually wasn't done with the sensibility of a Grant Cardone, a Donald Trump, a Sam Zell, a Steve Schwartzman, a Bruce Flatt of Brookfield. It wasn't done as a sort of business person, private equity, venture capitalist, so on and so forth. It was done more in the spirit of Henry David Thoreau or Peter Mayle, Seeking Provence, or Dario Castagno, Too Much Tuscan Sun. It was done more in the spirit of a mountain retreat, a withdrawal from society, like Thoreau at Walden's Pond, into your own Shangri-La, Xanadu. So it wasn't done as like, okay, I have my Excel spreadsheet, and if I buy this property here and I put in this, and then on the exit, it's going to give me this. So it wasn't done as a rationalist. It was done as a dreamer. And so now I'm very much pragmatic, rationalist investor. Then I was just looking for freedom. And so, and it ties in perfectly. It dovetails perfectly with my emphasis on money and capital. Because someone watching these videos might say, oh my God, this guy Pietros Maneos, all he cares about, all he talks about is money, 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 money. And if you were just to replace the word money with either freedom or independence, that actually would be more accurate. So if you were to say all Pietros Maneos cares about is freedom, 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 or independence, 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 I think that is much more an accurate description. I actually did a video a little while back, Alex, that if you pull it up, maybe I can even just link it in the description here, the desire for wealth, materialism for independence. And you'll see in your own life, Alex, some people want to be very wealthy for material things. I mentioned going to Celebrate on closing that deal to a very ritzy steakhouse in Boca Raton where there are Rolls Royces, Bentleys, Maseratis, Porsches. So you'll find that some people really want material things. They want jewelry, they want cars, they want 8,000 square foot McMansions, they want 4-week European vacations. So they want the idea of the good life, right? The almost like the Robin Leach lifestyles of the rich and famous. Whereas you'll find that other people like myself who are very focused on money. I mean, I think about money most of my waking hours now, right? Between my real estate investments, my stock investments, what I really desire is freedom and independence from society, to never have to put together a resume and go out into the labor market and be dependent on another human being to say to me, yes, you have the job of taking my orders, and I think this actually goes back to being Greek, and it's probably in my DNA. Greeks, perhaps more than other cultures, going back to Herodotus and Thucydides, really value the principle of independence. If you look at a lot of Greek immigrants, even in the Northeast, in Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Philadelphia, a lot of them own diners and restaurants, and they wanted to own their own businesses. They didn't come here and necessarily look for a job. Maybe they got a job out of necessity or desperation, but really their end game was, if they were the dishwasher at the diner, was one day to save their pay and own the diner, right? And so I have that sensibility of freedom and independence, and I've always thought that you can beat the system by being Henry David Thoreau, right? Meaning independent from society, apart from society. But you can also beat the system by being Carl Icahn or Warren Buffett, meaning having so much capital that you're not part of the day-to-day suffering and toil of others. You're sort of above society through capital, or you're apart from society through withdrawal and independence. You're in your 40-acre property, you're growing your own vegetables, you have solar panels, you're off grid, or you're on Wall Street and you're Steve Schwartzman, okay, at Blackstone. So, or you're Bruce Flatt at Brookfield, or you're Cardone at Cardone Capital. And so that's really, when you ask, like, who is Pietros Maneos? The Bramabella project wasn't the same project as the mobile home park that I mentioned the other day. I'm a different person now than I was in 2012. So I hope that makes sense. If you want some more clarification on that, I'd be happy to do another video or chat with you about it. But that just kind of sums up the sort of the philosophy that I had then and the philosophy that I have now. So yeah, just to reiterate though, that it was, from savings, some investments that I had that I cashed out, but it was really to live and thrive at Bramabella. It wasn't to do, like something you'd see on Bigger Pockets, right? Like, oh, I put this much in and I got this much out, and I had my spreadsheets and I had all this planned. It was like, I just want to be independent. I didn't want to have to work for anyone. I didn't want to be a W-2 person. I didn't want to be dependent on a wage or a salary. And it was that desperation for independence. And then towards the end of Bramabella, I realized, because I built it up, because I had planted, actually, we'll pull this up now. This was a article on Bramabella, actually, in the local paper in that area in North Carolina. That's the black truffle orchard behind me. Directly in front of me here is a blueberry bush right there. These are my tomatoes and peppers I was like selling to a little wholesaler there, and it just says here, Maneos has spent the past 4 years turning the 40-acre tract into a growing spot for 800 vines of super Tuscans, including Barbera, Cabernet Franc, and Sangiovese. He's also marketing Bramabella Vineyards as a wedding or special occasion venue. And just an article, maybe I can link it there. I'll link it in the description on that. But again, that was just more about, and it's interesting, if you study the history of wealth, if you look at going back in history, wealth was usually based on land. So having a 40-acre or a 400-acre property was very much in the sensibility of the European aristocracy or landed gentry, somewhere between those two. And that land was how wealth was measured. The royalty in any society and the aristocracy in any society owned land. That has shifted, I would say, with capitalism through who owns the factories, who owns the means of production, who owns capital or shares in businesses. And so Bramabella is very much an old world European landed gentry type of sense of wealth, whereas now my wealth is much more modern. It's in cash flowing real estate not an agricultural land, and it's in stocks. It's in business. And what are stocks? But pieces of businesses, the ownership of businesses. So yeah, that's just an interesting side note. The transition. Actually, I read a book on that very topic, and it's an excellent book. I believe it's by the British historian David Carradine. Let me go back here to off of here. It's by David Carradine, and it's titled "The Decline and Fall of the British Aristocracy." It's an excellent read, and in that book, one of the many things that I gleaned from it is that the English aristocracy towards the end, the way they were able to sustain themselves and survive was either they became business people, merchants, which they had almost contempt for. They would say something like, "Oh, he's in trade," and they would look like contempt and sneering for trade or business. Or they sold off their lands that were what one might call white elephant, right? Which is a drain of capital. And they sold off the lands, and then they bought stock with that and lived off dividends, or they bought a small apartment in London and invested in bonds and stocks. So they're able to convert their landholdings, which were keeping them poor or making them poor, into productive assets. And so it was how the aristocracy tried to maintain itself. And it's always good to read economic history like that. I also read many books on the French Revolution and the French aristocracy. And there's a line, I believe it was from that period, not the English period. And it's a great line. It's one of the aristocrats lamenting his fate because his lands are being pulled away or about to be pulled away. And he looks at someone and he says, "What will become of me without my rent rolls?" Right? I mean, he was living off of rents. I live off of rents. In fact, when I went to the bank to do this refinance, tax returns they wanted, leases, rent roll. Rent roll was part of what I had to submit. But I think it's like a kind of a beautiful poetic line. What will become of me without my rent rolls? And so there you go. So yeah, so that's pretty much it, Alex. I hope that answered your question to a certain extent. Also, in addition to the personal training business I had and some different investments and saving, I published a novella here. I'm actually at the time that I had some sales from there. The Italian Pleasures of Gabriele Patercalos. You can see that was published in 2012. So I had that going on at the time as well. And it wasn't the 300. The Bramabella was purchased in the twos, and it was only on the exit of Bramabella where you could say I got lucky, right? Because I spent all my time like planting blueberries and vines and bringing in flowers and making sure the place was painted and pressure washed, and it was just I tried to create it like a Xanadu Shangri-La Garden of Eden. And because I put all that energy into the aesthetic element, it appreciated in value. It actually went up 3x or maybe even close to 4x, depending, 3 to 4x on that. And again, that you could say that's luck. You could say that's effort and doing those things. But that was how I attained that capital to do this. Now, Charlie Munger, who I often mention, talks about the first 100,000 is the hardest. And so, I'm not sure of your financial situation, but let's even take Cardone. I've done a deep dive in Cardone. From my understanding, his first deal, and you could go back in his videos and find this somewhere. He talked about he was selling in sales. He was selling cars. And he said something effective. I was, 40 years old, 41, whatever he was, which is around my age. Maybe it was in his 30s. I'm not sure on that. But, I had $1 million in the bank, and I was driving a Toyota Corolla, and I wanted to make a play in real estate. So he saved to make that first big play. Okay. And so for me, you see that first play was on those two properties, and it happened there. But, it might even be like with you, it might be just look, if you're able to save, 10, 15, 20, 30,000 a year, whether you're putting it in the stocks, whether you're putting it just in a savings account to one day make a real estate play, maybe in your 20s and 30s, you're just putting that away, and it's maybe not to your mid 30s, early 40s when you can do that. I mean, I was, the time was like 36, I want to say, when that really started to happen for me. 35, 36. So I wasn't like one of these people you see on YouTube. They're like 19 years old and they're making like $1 million a year at 20 years old with e-commerce or ad revenue, or, because again, in my youth, I really wasn't money focused at all. I'm much more interested in humanities. You guys, as I mentioned all these books, David Carradine, Neil Ferguson, Camille Paglia, Nassim Nicholas Taleb. I'm much more like a reader, thinker than like a money person. It wasn't until my mid 30s where I kind of made that shift and I said, you know what? I want to get really, really rich. But there's certain people that are wired like that when they're 19 or 20 or 21. But again, usually those people that are wired like that want the Rolls Royce, the McMansion, the private jet. They want like the luxury lifestyle. And that's why they're so money focused in their youth. That's just a personal observation, and not everyone's the same, of course. But anyways, Alex, hopefully you found this informative and that answered your question. And let me know any other questions that you have. Appreciate you being here at the channel. Take care. Ciao.